right, happy to be joined by my next guest here on Sports Card Nation. He's a content creator in his own right, and he started with the card table, then transitioned to a dual show with Dan Servia called the Card Cast. And I've been on the card table. It was a great time. Wound up being a long appearance by me because we both can talk. I think me more so than Jason. But without further ado, let me welcome Jason Vastine to the show. Jason, welcome.
John, thank you for having me. Thank you for being on the card table way back when. I think that was just at the end of last year. It was right before the new year, right? And it's kind of one of those time things where time shrinks this year. It seems like such a long time ago, but it really hasn't been. So it's great to be here chatting with you again, and thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for coming on. One thing that I appreciate about you, and this is being 100% sincere. One thing I try to be like, we got to talk, with the hobby stuff. It's not all roses and daisies all the time, and we got to talk about some negative stuff. But I try to be overall. I try to be positive. When listening to you with your show, it's one thing that really stood out to me is how positive you were. Sort of reminding me, I hate to say it like this, reminding me of what I try to do. And I think there's not enough of that sometimes. I think sometimes that lacks in some other content creation. And I get about being honest and talking about what's really going on, but it can be done and be positive and have a passion for the hobby. And I know that came out with you, and you asked me to come on, and it was no doubt an easy decision. I was honored to do it, and we had I can only speak for myself. It was a lot of fun, and we wound up talking a lot off the air as well as during the actual pod.
It's what it's all about, man. And being transparent, being forthright. I mean, integrity is everything. And I mean, I was watching Twitter today, and there's somebody out there doing giveaways or not doing giveaways, and it's like all you have in the hobby and business in general, I think, is integrity. So that's all you got. You got your name, your pseudonym, whatever it might be, your podcast, your brand, really. And that's something that's exciting about today more than anything, is everybody can have their own brand. And it's how are you going to manage that brand, and how are you going to run your the business of you? So try to keep it positive. I mean, it's easy to fall into those pitfalls, right? Of just, there's always something going on, but there's so much, I don't say opportunity, but just joy and learning to be had through sports cards, trading cards, and the hobby in general, that avoid those pitfalls and those negative points. It's easy to go down those paths. We're trained as humans to kind of focus on the negative. And I don't know, that's been something cards, I wouldn't say will save my life, but in a lot of ways helped me with some things I was working through and battling both mentally and physically. And it's I think that's not a distraction necessarily, but it certainly has been a distraction from some of those pains, and it's cool that way. So I try to just bring that to my audience, to the hobby in general, and can't wait to just continue experiencing that learning and joy that I find from it, and sharing that with others.
Yeah, and your story is much like a lot of folks. Like, you were in the hobby as a younger person. You kind of left, and you kind of came back sort of recently. I know a little bit of your story, but for those listening out there that don't, kind of, whatever time you want to spend, kind of give your background, how you started, you went away, and then when you came back, and all that good stuff.
Absolutely. So I was that kid that collected when I was 4 years old, and was head over heels obsessed. I mean, I can get pretty obsessive about stuff, but I learned to literally read and count numbers, sorting cards, and looking at the stats on the back of cards. And this was in Minnesota too, when I'm tell my age, I guess, but I'm 38, and Kirby Puckett was in his heyday. And so it was 1987 with the Twins winning the World Series. And I got to experience that as a 5-year-old, and it just, sports were everything to me. And so growing up in school, I always did good in school and everything, played baseball through high school, and later on through some amateur ball. And I guess winding that short, baseball was kind of the reason we left the hobby, because we got really busy with it my junior and senior year. And then of course college hits, and it's like, okay, sports cards get left behind a little bit. So like that was right around the year 2000. Bad time to leave with like Ichiro, Pujols, Tom Brady coming in right after that. But
Yeah.
it's all good. And so like I like to look at it as I took like a 20-year buying break. Because that collection that we had, like we did card shows back in the day, really deep into the autograph scene too. Like I have a massive like memorabilia collection. I shouldn't say massive, I don't know. Everything's relative, right? But like pretty big autograph collection. It was all in-person stuff. And I got crazy stories from like my dad was laid off for a year. We got to go down to the Metrodome and meet everyone, literally everyone. Nolan Ryan, Robin Yount, all those guys. So like it was just a huge impact on the young me. Fast forward, 20 years basically, and I hear a bunch of folks talking about how sports cards are hot again. And man, if I could have $1 for every time my mom threatened to throw out this entire room of cards and memorabilia in my parents' house, and it dang near burnt down. And so it was just kind of sitting there, and I had a bad back injury in a car accident, and I was like immobilized for 6 months. I could just like lay on my stomach, basically. That's all I could do. And I'm like, okay, bring me over some cards, because I'm going to lay on my stomach and start going through these things and pricing them out and comping them. I was like, oh, okay. Like start, finding things. And I'm like, okay, but like, what's PSA 10, SGC, BGS? What do you do next? And so I had to like learn all of that. I had to get some money to like fund all of that. And so that's what I started doing. I just started selling on eBay, had to learn that, finding my way on all the various social media channels, whether it's Twitter, Facebook. I mean, there's so many different channels now, and finding different selling platforms. And I set up a like system for myself, from based on like martial arts and jujitsu, to kind of like go from like white belt to blue belt to purple belt, and like just kind of chunked all my learning out into these periods of time, and spent hundreds and hundreds of hours researching. Still do that. I mean, just poring over cards because, well, it's my modern day obsession now. And it's been fantastic coming back into the hobby. I mean, in an insanely marked time in the hobby's history. It couldn't be a better time in some ways, from like rediscovering all my cards and card archaeology. But like at the same time, it's also challenging in that sense to like find your way. And so I'm trying to like learn from, I mean, that's what I wanted to talk to John Newman, because I'm like, I got to learn from these guys. I got to talk to, Brett McGrath. I got to learn from them and just talk and learn to people. And like, that's where you find that, like you're saying, like the hobby's the people. And if you open your ears and you listen to folks, like you will find your path in it. And there's so much fun connecting with people, not just fun, but like earnest connections with people throughout the hobby that you have trust with. You trade cards, somebody that's looking for that one. And that's something that didn't fully exist way 20 years ago, but now exists in a whole different paradigm because of the internet.
Yeah, social media is different. I'm older than you, make you feel a little bit better. I got you by double digits too, make you even feel even more better. So I always tell the story, social media. I was far removed from it back when I was in the cards, in my origin days. And I wouldn't really trade that. I think I appreciate both worlds, kind of living in both worlds. I love social media. It's been very good to me because, like you said, something you mentioned kind of earlier when you first started talking was, you got to kind of avoid those pratfalls of the negative stuff. It can be a bad thing if you sort of let it and you go down those rabbit holes. And so if you can kind of be disciplined, and you mentioned your martial arts background, I think that might even help you kind of navigate and avoid some of those negative parts of social media and the hobby. And you mentioned something too that that I think is great is you kind of on a downtime where you were laid up with that back injury, and the cards became sort of therapeutic for you. Like you said, you're here you are in your stomach. You can't do you maybe things, obviously you couldn't do things you previously could at that time. And so cards sort of kept your mind occupied and you kind of focused. And I love when I hear stories where cards have had that sort of effect on someone at different times in their life. And it's great. And the tagline, hobbies of people. When you say, I appreciate the compliment about learning from me, but I'm even at 30 something plus years into this, Jason, I'm still learning. We're all learning. This hobby
That's the beauty of it.
is yeah, it is. It's changed. Literally, I always joke around like the old hobby, you could go away for a whole month and not miss a beat. Literally come back and not a whole lot's that much different. You can't do that for 3 or 4 days today, and you'd have to play catch up. And it's for an old guy like me, it keeps me on my toes. I think I like that because it keeps me focused, and I can't go away even if I wanted to. And you talk about missing the year 2000 with Brady and Pujols and Chiro. I'll make you feel a little bit better. So I took about a 3 or 4 year hiatus later on, and guess what year I missed? I missed 2011. You might know Mike Trout.
2003 was another good year to miss.
Yeah. So I missed sort of the Mike Trout rookie year, and sort of had to backtrack there. But it would have been nice to have been a little more active that year. I kind of my son at the time was 11. I was coaching Little League, Pop Warner, and I just sort of I didn't sell it. I just kind of I hit pause and didn't get anything new, and just kind of put my inventory was what it was. But I just if I could have a mulligan in 2011,
no mulligans though, right?
I'd love to do over to be stories. There's a lot. I have a lot of mulligans if I could. And so,
that's
I may know a lot.
Like, we've got the tools to find stuff now too. Where before you had to wait for the card show or go to the local card store. Like now you've got stuff like Card Ladder or Market Movers and these data tools, which love them or hate them. Like that's right where my brain went of okay, how are these things trending? Buying at the right time, like that used to be behind a curtain. Only certain people had access to that information because you had to have high volume going on. So now you have the ability, even though it moves really fast, I think one of the most exciting things about the card market today is all the data that's out there now. I think eBay just made TerraPeak free. If people aren't using TerraPeak, check that out. It's insanely valuable. And so I think that's, like I was talking before, of coming back into the hobby, it's this onslaught of information. But if you really just chunk things out, and that's what I try to do for myself too, of okay, what's the next step you can take? What's the one thing that's going to make the biggest difference for your collecting, your investing, your flipping, whatever you want to do in the hobby? That's a big thing. We got to grow the pie and think about the whole. We're all the hobby is so complex. I was just doing this map of everything the other day and how fast things are changing. I was okay, what's going to happen in 3 to 5 years? And thinking out further than this year and this season, right? Everybody, everything's so daily right now. You get caught up in that. And it's okay, what's happening in the future? And the hobby is so incredibly complex. We've got distributors and manufacturers, and then you got the new age resellers where people are botting retail websites and taking all that stock. They're like a new age distributor. And I know there's a lot of hate for botters, and I get it, right? It's a whole different world out there I've been trying to learn kind of that take on it. And I think they're new distributors, and love them or hate them, I don't think they're going anywhere. And so it's how do we work with that? If that's just going to be part of the hobby, do you wait it out? Do you work with them? Does Panini pull from retail shelves entirely, or Tops too? I mean, what happens next? Very intriguing.
I think we're seeing more direct to consumer with wax. We see Tops do it with their on demand. We see them do it, which I'm a part of, and I'm a very transparent guy. I've profited greatly from the Montgomery 582 Club, from some of the exclusive offers there. We're seeing uh, some Targets and Walmarts really just go away from carrying, sports card products and even hobby products in general. I don't even want to just say sports cards, but some of them have even discontinued some of the, the Pokemon, the Yu-Gi-Oh. They just don't want to be bothered with, some of the crush and people in there trying to tackle distributors and each other in fights. And so I said this, I don't want to pat myself on the back, but, I said maybe over a year ago that the retail is going to change. I just saw it coming. It was getting violent. It reminded me, I'm old, so I don't know if you remember back in the day when Cabbage Patch Kids were like all the rave, and suburban housewives were stabbing each other for a doll. And it's a weird comparison, but really it's gotten to that point. You're seeing, and now besides the people just waiting for the distributor, then you're hearing distributors doing shady things. Their buddy comes in, or it never hits the shelf, period. Or someone from the store who's wised up and realizes what these worth. They're just not buying it themselves, and it's going out the back door. And so much of this has happened that I think, they're not going to really come out and say it this way, but I think Panini and Topps have said, we got to do something about it, or what do we do about it? The other thing, let's even take all like the controversial stuff out. I'll use Prism for example, Jason. When Panini's selling Prism basketball at $20 a blaster, they know what it's doing on the secondary market at $200-$300 very quickly after release. And I mean, I almost can't blame them. Someone in that office saying, "Hey, why don't we just like cut out the middleman and sell?" Even if we go to $40, we know we're going to sell them.
Topps
or whatever. Yeah.
Topps did 2021 Bowman. They had $30 blasters direct. And they were 25, I think, on Target. And I'm not sure if they're hitting stores. I think they're just hitting stores this week. But Topps definitely did that direct model.
Yeah, this is
more costly, but it was available for this day and age. It was available on Topps' website for like decades, relevant. Most things are like seconds, and it was up there for a good while to purchase from.
Yeah. We're gonna see more of that. We're gonna see more of that. I don't know if people are gonna like what I'm about to say. We're gonna see more of that and less retail. I think you're gonna see. You're already seeing stores, like I said, just say we don't want it. We don't make enough. We sell enough toilet paper and TV dinners, and we don't need that. People don't realize like they don't. The Walmarts and Target don't make a ton of money from that, and so they're weighing the distraction, the hassle. They're getting complaints from regular shoppers saying there's 20 people blocking this aisle. What's going on here? And so you're starting to see it sort of go away. It's sort of sad as someone who likes to go to Walmart and grab a blaster or two or three or whatever. But I kind of saw this coming. The writing was sort of on the wall. And I think truthfully, I think it's actually happening faster than I sort of predicted. I think I kind of said in a few years, and I think it's on a faster pace. And, I kind of, the younger person in me, I wish I hate to see a kid be able not go into a retail store maybe to get a blaster and be in the hobby that way. We are seeing LCSs sort of make a comeback. That's a good thing.
That's really great. More card shows too. We need more card shows. I think that helps.
And those, I mean, we're dealing with the pandemic, but I think post-pandemic, we're seeing card shows arise now during the pandemic. That's even a real sign of where the hobby is strength-wise. And so post-pandemic, I think it's going to be even greater. And so I'm a show guy. I did my first show at 15 years old. So, shows have a special place in my heart. I opened my first LCS at 20, so they have a special place in my heart. I think they're both vital. There's something, we can buy, this, Jason, we can buy cards online from all sorts of platforms, eBay being probably the biggest one. But there's something about an in-person transaction, chat. Yeah, chatting with the dealer, me being one of those. I've been on both sides of the table, still am.
Yeah.
And having that card in your hand and seeing it in person. When you buy something online, you're hoping it's what you see in those scans and pictures, and that doesn't always tell the full effect. I love when people post pictures on like social media and say, what do you think this will grade? Like you can't tell from a. I don't even usually. Sometimes I even get asked directly. Someone will like DM me a pic, like because they know I grade a lot. Like, what do you think? And I'll say, listen, I'll give you a sort of an assessment from a picture, but listen, that's hard.
You can tell it's
hard. It's hard to do, like because you can't see everything. Like when I even like do my pre-inspection on my own cards, I'm using like jeweler's loops and magnification, and so and it's amazing what you find.
Anybody that's grading needs to get like that, like lighted up LED magnifying glass, jeweler's loop. I mean, it's like $10. It'll save you so much
cheap.
time.
Amazon's not a sponsor, but I'm gonna plug them. I mean, I got a nice jeweler's headlamp, USB lighted. Like you said, I think it was like $14. We're Prime members, so I had that thing in 2 days. And I always tell people when they ask me about grading, remember, someone asked me, why do you look at it that closely with magnification? And I'm like, well, guess what they're going to do too. So if I can catch it here, and that was the mistake I made in my early days of grading, Jason. I was not doing. I was just sort of doing it via the naked eye, and then just getting all these, and getting all these 8s and 8.5s back. And I'm like, what am I doing wrong? And I'm like, I'm not doing you. If you're going to send it to them, do what they're going to do and see if it passes your test first. And
absolutely beat your cards up more than they're going to do. It's kind of like back to the martial arts stuff. And, like you'll hear any like MMA fighter. It's like, and I was not an MMA fighter, but like you want to make practice harder than the fight. Like once you get to the fight, it just needs to be muscle memory. And so the same thing with grading, I think, and this is something I had to go out there and learn. I knew grading. I mean, grading was around 20 years ago, but like I wasn't grading 20 years ago. And so that was the first thing I was doing with like digging all my cards out. I'm like Kobe rookies, a bunch of Jordans and stuff. I'm like, okay, like I can't do this all at once, but I got to grade these and I need to look at them. Like, so I was going through them like 5 times over, like QA 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and like whittling it down to that like necessary batch, which I mean, I'm just jumping right into the grading. I think the changes in grading right now are even more so than like the retail and manufacturer side of the card hobby. From my unique perspective, looking in 20 years out, I think the grading changes, and in particular what PSA has done this year, are the most impactful changes on the hobby of anything. And we haven't seen how this fully matriculates out the back end of it. But the number of cards at PSA, the pricing changes, the service levels, the complete shutoff, CSG, HGA, SGC changing things, SGC going fully transparent, which was really, I was trying to tell this to my wife. I'm like, that was a remarkable video that they did, full showing like the full operation. That's never been done before. Correct me if I'm wrong, but like grading,
not to that level, no.
Beckett, but like, and Beckett too, like for people are learning more about Beckett. Some of the like the new graders are all about PSA, and I'm just kind of like, I've got experiments going in every little place. I've graded with everybody I possibly could. I couldn't just because of like the ticketing system with some of them, but man, has that been a fun, call it experiment. And in some cases, like a marathon, we can say, where it's like I submitted things, last September now, and like just waiting. And I've heard some more of that recently too, like with the value of the cards sitting at PSA right now and kind of this market lull we're in. Those play hand in hand. And so like once the Valve gets turned back on and we see cards not pouring out of PSA, but I mean, SGC is ramped up. CSG is behind, but like ramped up now too. I see their return days kind of leveling off this summer, and like heading into the national. It's going to be a great wild time. I mean, the liquidity of cards once they become graded that's the thing that I couldn't really wrap my head around with like all the raw stuff. But like once cards are graded, people want to call them assets, alternative assets, whatever we want to call it. There's a different liquidity involved when it's established. It's this grade, and here's who looked at it. And I hadn't felt or seen that before until recently when I have more graded cards in hand and like taking it to shows and trading. It's like it's that trustful. It's like it's not quite blockchain, but it's like that trust connection of like, oh, it's an 8, it's a 9, it's a 10. You know what you're getting, and that really changes the game. So I think the PSA changes and grading in general right now, and I don't say chaos that's going on, but it's definitely the like biggest disruption in the industry, and it'll be again really exciting to see this next year and see how this all unfolds. What are you seeing? I know you've been around and seen a bigger chunk of this than I have, but what are you seeing right now, John?
So I'm big into grading. I tell people even if if you're in the hobby and you're not a grader, you're sort of anti-grading. I'll say it like that. You have to be honest of how important grading is. Even if you're not someone who buys graded cards or submits graded cards, because they have a direct effect for what raw cards do too. When PSA stopped taking submissions on the lower levels and only did the premium $300 level, what did we see? We saw raw cards increase in prices realized. So even if you're not a grading person per se, you don't buy graded, you don't like graded cards, you don't submit, you actually benefited from the shutdown at PSA. So you don't have to like grading. And everyone's hobby your way, I always say. And there's nothing wrong with that. That doesn't make you a bad hobbyist. Your hobby is just as much as me and Jason here. But what I think what bothers me is when the anti-graders sort of belittle the effect of graded cards, and you can't do that. You can not like the practice of them, but you can't say that this isn't a huge thing in the hobby. All you got to do, you mentioned the National. Go to the National and look at the lines at all the grading companies there. PSA, SGC, Beckett's there. I have a feeling we'll see a few of the new ones make their presence be felt at this year's National. So you can't look at that and say, it's not it's overrated or it's not a big deal. You're just really, they're not being truthful. You're just taking your disdain for it and not being honest with your assessment. Right. So I don't
scam. Like I saw that out there again. Like, call it what it is, but it's not a scam. And I'll just say, like, I mean, we all pre-grade our cards, but like I sent in what I thought was a diehard 10. I mean, I got a microscope because I was a microbiologist. And so I got a microscope to look at these things. It was a Kevin Durant rookie, and it came back a 7. And am I brokenhearted? Yep. But like, it's like, I'm not out there crying about it that it's a scam. And like, I know grades are going to change. It depends on who grades that card. We're dealing with humans. And man, humans make a lot of mistakes, even if 3 or 4 of us are looking at it. That's why we have trial by jury. It takes 12 people to decide these things, and sometimes more. And sometimes those juries get them wrong too. So like, to call it a scam, is it a challenging piece of the hobby? Absolutely. Is it well understood? No, I don't think it is. I mean, it's you send your cards in, it's a black box. They give you a number back, and somehow that can like 5 to 10x your card value, or crazy. You send it to a different company. I cracked some SGC slabs, Sinner admitted, and sent those to PSA, upgraded some cards, that was a risk I took. And I just wanted to learn. And so like, I thought they were 9s. SGC, I thought, graded these cards extremely hard. Again, I went over them, and they converted, and they were like 8.5s. They went to PSA 9s, and I'm thrilled to the gills. And why those are different values between different companies. I mean, let the market dynamics play out as they will with liquidity and all these different new grading companies. I think competition is so good for the marketplace, and it's really good for all of us. I mean, we're going to get all tribal, and there's BGS people, and there's CSG people, and there's HGA, you know, and you know what? There's room for everybody. I think that's something people really need to be like patient with right now, and understanding like, hey, if you can't submit cards to PSA, there's other opportunities in Raw out there. I think now is a great time to buy. We got this dip going on. It's like, all right, what's good out there? And you know, focusing on those things and looking again like for that like abundance mindset and not that minimal mindset that just kind of puts others down. There's enough space for everybody. Come on board, HGA. You've made your mistakes, but that's how we learn, and that's how everybody gets better. So I think that we need to be very patient with everything right now and with each other in general. We're coming out of the back end of COVID. Everybody, I mean, shout out Mental Health and Awareness Week this week too. We were talking a little bit about that earlier. Like, we need to have each other's backs and like be positive in the hobby. I think more, just in general, and the congregations and card shows are going to help that as we realize we're all humans and not pseudonyms on Twitter. But yeah, I think just we need to get out of that shell a little bit of like thinking the sky has fallen and there's room for everybody, even though the cost, I have to admit, I mean, 20 years ago things didn't cost this much, right? But so I'm really grateful in that way to be able to participate. I know not everybody can. That's a bigger challenge to me of how do we get more people into the hobby? How do we make it affordable for everybody? I think that's the challenge we should all be focusing on, rather than dividing into groups and becoming more tribal, which seems to be happening.
No, that's a great point, Jason. And you know, an old guy like me, like I'm, you know, I hope I'm here a little bit longer, but you know, that's life, and we need that younger. I mean, I started as a 7-year-old kid. You started as a kid. I don't want to lose that. I think we're seeing where the market's right now. I think we're seeing a lot of people get in at their 20s and 30s rather than kids get in. And I'd like to see that come back. I know there are kids in the hobby. I don't want to sound like doomsday. We just talked about being positive, but you know, going to some shows, you know, it seems like there's a little bit less kids than I'd like to see. And you know, maybe it's me just kind of projecting myself, but getting started as a 7-year-old, I wouldn't change anything about that. And I'd like to think, you know, even kids today, even though the problem, you know what, I don't want to say the problem, some of the issues today with kids is this, they're getting pulled in so many different directions. You know, sports, I've played baseball, I played football. It was seasonal, right? Your season was over, but now sports are year round. There is no off season in sports. So these kids are playing on travel teams year round. They got personal trainers at 8, 9 years old, and so there is no real downtime. Like I had, you know, when the baseball season was over, I put my glove in my bag, and you know, that was it. But now that glove never gets put up. Now you got all sorts of video games, social media, and so there's a lot of things tugging these kids away from sports cards and that stuff. And so I think it's difficult, you know, or at least you know, I'll even say it, if I was 7 today rather than in 1979, I don't know if I would be in the sports cards, honestly. I'd like to think I would, but I honestly don't know. And you know, going into Pokemon, the grading too,
right? Like even Pokemon, you got to have a dad that's into it, or you know, a friend or somebody that's going to get you into it. And so I think that's the big point though, of like, and I admittedly like need to do more of this, which is like, I don't want to say giveaways, but just random acts of kindness. I love it when I see it at a card show and somebody's got a table, like just a little box of Pokemon. They're giving away, you know, cards or packs. Somebody gave my daughter like, you know, a bag of like these holdered up cards from the 90s, you know, and she going through those and treasures those things immensely. She's 4. And it's like that, people like those little acts of kindness mean so much to those kids. Like she pulls those things out all the time. Me and my son look at his
Yeah.
Pokemon card. My 6-year-old has like the most ridiculous 6-year-old Pokemon collection because we open packs every Friday. That's his like end of school week thing. And it just became its own thing where we play it. We play, people actually play Pokemon still. That's a real thing. That I looked for back on the back end of COVID. I kept telling him like, hey man, like once we can kind of get together again, like there's Magic on Friday nights and we can go to these stores and people like collectors like you, and you'll be able to meet them and play with them. And so like, I don't know, those are the things we need to be focused on. And again, like bringing more collectors in, and that's not to just say like indoctrinate our kids into card collecting. I certainly was. I was like my dad's grunt. Sort these cards, Jason. That's really what I looking back. I was just his labor. But I treasure that, and 20 years later, like those cards were selling. Like those are, I want to do good with those things, and that's kind of like, I don't know, the next steps for the card table and like what would become next. Paying it forward and doing good with those things we're afforded, however they may come to you. So.
Yep. And you know what? Great point with the those little random acts of kindness. They're so easy to do, man. You can send cards with the price of a stamp. And like you said, the impact it could have on someone on the receiving end of that. You could be bringing another hobbyist in that will have a passion the same way we do. And so I always say, they're so important. And, people send them to me. I do a lot of giveaways just with sponsors of the show and just my own stuff. And they're just very easy to do, and it goes a long way. And giving, I enjoy sometimes giving stuff more than sometimes receiving stuff. I know it's the old cliche, but I really do. When you get that, thank you letter or, shout out, hey, thanks, John, for made my day, or my boy loved it. And that just goes a long way. It's good for you internally. And I believe in that. I believe in philanthropy and all that. Not even just cards, but just in general. But since we're, this is a hobby show, so we'll keep it on that level. And one thing I wanted to touch with grading, and as someone who does a lot of it and has been for a while, some of the changes are definitely good. I think PSA is going with the sort of like the fingerprinting to maybe kind of keep track on some resubs and things like that. If there's a negative or something I'm not a fan of is, I know they've raised prices. I get that demand, but to some of the levels, like, I know a lot of people say, oh man, those cards shouldn't be submitted. But here's my thing. If someone if they're paying for it, that's their card, right? Every card might have a different meaning. A Greg Jeffries to me, to someone else would be like, oh man, that guy didn't pan out. But to me, that was my guy back in the day. And so, you can't just paint with a broad brush and say, oh, that card's not grade worth, like submit worthy. And if someone's paying for their cards to get graded, that's their business. I sort of get sometimes fired up. Like when you pay for someone's submission, you can tell them what they can send in. But until that day, like it's their business. And oh, you're the reason I'm waiting 6 months for my cards because you're sending in $33 cards. Like, no, they're not the reason. Right? Do you want to blame anyone? I mean, blame the grading companies for, and I'm not even saying it's completely their fault when they're getting swamped with submissions. I understand that, but don't blame the consumer who's just enjoying the hobby in any. So what I'm a little worried that the price levels are going to be high where someone who wants to grade cards now won't be able to. And I don't want to see that happen. I think SGC's come down in price. They're a sponsor of the show to be 100% transparent. I'm glad they did. I was critical of them. I'm very, very, and I talked to Peter before I was critical and said, hey, I don't really agree with this, just so and he knows that about me. I'm a straight shooter. I'm glad they came back down. We see some other companies, CSG is I think at like $12 still, $15 a card. I think that's very reasonable. HGA, I'm not
6 month
personally, I'm not a
turnaround though.
fan. I'm not a
6 month
fan, but
turnaround with CSG, right?
yeah,
Like that.
and that's what's going to happen. And so here's my problem. If you want to call it a problem, here's my concern. Like if you want to charge a lot of money for submitting, that's your company. You can charge whatever you want. I'd like to see them guarantee some of these turnaround times at these prices.
Yeah.
You're hearing people submit cards at like $100 a pop, and it's still taking 6, 7 months. And I've even heard stories where people have submitted cards at $100 level, and another group is at the bulk level at like $20, $30, and they've got their cards back sooner than the $100 group. And so that would run me the wrong way. So I guess if you're going to charge a premium price, I think you got to stand by the turnaround times more, or give something back to consumer. Hey, if it's not back in this amount of time, for every day late, it's $5 off the cost, or we refund you, or even a credit, even if it's not actual refund, but you get a $50 credit on your next. So I like to see some, where it's not always one-sided. Like you'll get your cards back when we send them back, and that's how it is. No questions asked, and
no soup for you.
Yeah, basically that's what it is. And the grading is not just one. I'm not going to pick on just one. I think they all are guilty of this. They've gotten spoiled to the point because demand is so great. There's no risk of, bad customer service is not going to hurt them right now, realistically. And so I'd like to see it be more of a two-way street than a one-way street. I'd like to see those prices still be reasonable enough. I know they're trying to, sometimes the price increases are to slow the influx. I get the rationale and the strategy, the business strategy behind the maneuvers. But, I'd like to still see even if PSA or whoever grading company says, hey, it's $20 a card, and there's no guarantee. We'll get it back to you as soon as we can, but there's no guarantee. And this level is $100, and you're going to get it back in 20 days. And if you don't get it back in 20 days, we're only going to charge you $60 a card instead of the $100. And I like to see something like that. I know I'm sort of wishful thinking here, and maybe, not going to be the case, but
you didn't talk about upcharges either. I mean, that's the other kicker on the back end. Like when you get charged for the grading differs with all the companies too. And so I think that's interesting. Each company's got its own value proposition now too, where it's like you want fancy labels, you want standardized turnaround times and standardized charges. There's uncertain value propositions with some of them. PSA has the highest value on the back end. I think we can say that honestly. They're kind of the peak value in some way. I mean, sparing like the BGS 10s, right? Those attract a higher value on the back end, but it'll be interesting. I want to see more competition. I think it's really great that they're doing this. But like you said, there's still opportunity in that market space. I don't know if anybody else is going to make an entrance now. You
got a lot of grading companies popping up, Jason. I just don't know how viable they're going to be long term. Everyone's jumping into the pool right now. There's a Black Mamba grading company that's
I saw that one. What was the April Fool's joke one? That was great. I want in, like, keep that around. Honestly, I think that's a viable.
I even did a joke one where I called it NFT grading. You send us your real car, and we'll send you a digital graded slab of the real card. It's crazy. It's funny. You know what? I'm into grading. I believe in it. I think it's a huge part of this hobby. I know. I mean, I hate to say it like that, but
really important.
I know it is. But to the people who don't like grading's sort of their own worst enemy too. They're guilty of shooting themselves in the foot at times, where that anti-grading person can say, "See, this is what I'm talking about." They sort of give them that side of the aisle, if you will, ammunition. And I guess that always bugs me, like when that happens, is like, think about some of the decision making before you release. SGC and when they did their initial price increase to $75, what day did they do it on? April 1st. A lot of people thought it was a joke when it wasn't. And I'm like, and I said, why not do that like either the day before or the day after? What's 24 hours either way in the grand scheme of things? I mean, stuff like that just is sort of a little bit head scratching. It is what it is. There are smart people running these companies. I'm not besmirching them, but sometimes makes you think like, how does something like that happen? But it is what it is. I mean, I'd like to see it still be an affordable option to people who want to get their cards encapsulated, whether it's a Greg Jeffries or a Kevin Durant rookie. I mean, that's up to the person, and I hope we don't lose that. I think we still have that with certain companies being at that price level, and PSA is, if you want to call them the standard. I don't know if they don't. Maybe they don't want those lower price cards eventually. I mean, the rumor is, even after things kind of settle down, they're going to be at $100 at the lowest level, and that's going to eliminate. Let's be real, that's going to eliminate a lot of cards and a lot of people from submitting. And it's a really, if you know anything about business, it's a real weird business model to raise prices to slow business down. What other business would you say that really occurs in, right? I mean, think about it. A restaurant doesn't raise prices so they have less people coming in the restaurant. They want that line. They're going to hand you that buzzer, and when it goes off, your table's up, right? They're not going to say, "Hey, we're
this industry, John." Only because I come from this industry, and sorry to interrupt there, but pharmaceuticals, and you want to talk about a broken industry, there is one of the brokest, but that's the one other industry I can think of where they raise prices because they can.
There's a few. I don't want to make it like it's just grading, but when you think about that, it's just, I don't know, it doesn't sit well with me. Let's just put it that just put it that way. And let's be real. Pharmaceuticals are probably more necessary than graded cards for people's health and well-being.
We shouldn't be raising prices.
No, I agree. So I don't know. I like when the hobby's available to everybody. You mentioned kids, not being able to sustain the hobby. I think it's a big issue. It's one that's near and dear to my heart for reasons I've already said, and I think we're sort of going away from that, and I don't know if we'll ever get. Someone asked me the other day. They kind of private messaged me like, "Do we ever? Is prices ever going to come down where if you were a kid with a $10 a week allowance, you can be in this hobby?" And I said I don't think so. But even at $10 a week, you can there's other things kids can do. They can have a favorite player and buy singles. So there's always ways. If someone wants to stay in the hobby, there's a way to stay involved. So I don't really buy like, well, there's no way at all. I just think you sort of lose. I mean, what's the most fun thing to do in the hobby? Let's be honest. What is it? Opening a pack of cards or a box of cards, right?
Yeah.
And so
don't make it out of my card.
That's becoming increasingly difficult for someone that doesn't have a lot of money. First off, it's harder to find wax now. We can't find it in the retail. I can't tell you how many times I went to Walmart, not even going for cards per se, just shopping for the house in general. And of course, you're going to look in the card aisle. You're going to take a chance and see what's there. And it's I know already. Like it's just nothing there. It's wiped out. And so it's getting trickier for a kid. When I was a kid, we're comparing apples to oranges in eras. We're talking the late 70s, early 80s. But every store I went to, every corner market growing up in New York City, there was packs of cards, all sorts of non-sports. I remember Jaws and Kiss and Star Wars and all that good stuff, right? And you
Yeah.
can't even find that sort of stuff anymore. It's just everything is just getting swallowed up. People are just taking it all, and I understand why, because you don't see it enough. How can you blame someone? That's why I don't blame anybody. Other people get mad when they see like a whole display rack bought out. Like, can you blame anyone? Because they're probably not going to run into that again. Like,
right.
Kind of this, and it's capitalism at its finest. You were there first. Your timing was right. It's probably more luck than anything else. And and like you said, there's a lot of animosity when someone like posts their victory, if you will. Like, hey, I got a display rack of Optic. Everyone's like, oh, say you should have left some. Like, it's funny. The people saying you should have left some would have bought the whole display themselves 80% of the time, right? It's easy to play armchair consumer when you didn't get the display rack, so
right.
There's a lot of that too. Like you said, you got to navigate through that stuff and just enjoy that. There's more than one way. There's numerous ways to enjoy the hobby, whether you like grading, you don't like grading, whether I open a lot less wax nowadays than I used to. And it's not as difficult as I thought it was going to be, and truthfully, it's done wonders to my bank and card account because it's been a better buying singles. How many times? Listen, it's great to open a box of cards. It's an adrenaline rush. I get all the hyperbole, but then a lot of times when that dust settles and you see what you pulled out of that thing, you're like, given a choice, can I have my $400 back, or can I keep the cards? Like, let's make a deal. Like, take the behind door number 2, right? You'd say, man, I'd like a do-over. But that, it's gamble. Sports cards can be gambling in certain aspects, and that's the gamble. And I've learned. It took me a while. I'm 48 years old. It took me some trial and error. I've just learned to play better odds, and I think for me, the better odds are buying single cards and lots and collections and closeout deals. And from my store days, I still get phone calls almost every day, not quite every day, but almost every day with buying opportunities. A lot of it's what we would call that junk wax era stuff, but I have bought collections out and even a couple, like, not card stores per se, but like a pharmacy that's going out of business, and they had some stock in the back and some vintage boxes, and what we would call, even the junk wax era boxes have made a comeback. For
sure,
I bought
all that eat 7 genres.
yeah, and I recently bought, like last year, maybe a year and a half ago, I bought like 10 boxes. It was not just them. It was in a bunch of other boxes too. I bought like 10 boxes in the 91 Upper Deck. And then that SP Jordan went nuts. Yeah. And so I'm not going to lie. I'm a very transparent person. I think I paid like $7 a box or $8-9 a box. And they wound up selling them for like $150 a piece.
Right.
And that's crazy when you think about it, but that's where we are, man. Things can change on a dime any given day. It just depends where the market goes. And for someone like me that's been in the hobby a long time, it keeps me on my toes, and I'm learning just as much as someone who maybe is not as long in the hobby as me. That's the fun. I always say my 30-something years doesn't make me any better than anyone. Just makes me more experienced, maybe. But some of that experience really doesn't matter. Like I was on my show, on this very show in 2020 when the pandemic first hit, and I told people, brace for impact. Cards are going to be the least things on people's minds pretty soon here. And I was way wrong, thankfully, and so what did all of my years of in the hobby? You're wrong sometimes. I'm the first to say
you're humble and you're willing to take that and learn. And I think that I was watching Rob from Burbank Sports Cards, and he's like, I comp. He was speaking in the first hand. He's like, he comps cards all day long. Like that guy, like he has no need to like really be into the like mix of his like massive operation out there at Burbank anymore. But he's like, no, I comp everything. It all kind of runs through the master computer known as Rob. And I'm like, I mean, there again, like there's somebody that has so much experience, so much knowledge, and here it's just, spoon it, the eat them up like Ezekiel Elliott, right? Like feed me. And I think that's being humble and understanding everybody's got a place in the hobby, and understanding that like we can change and adapt at any given point to like getting upset because I can't collect my team and like the rainbows and every card of every player. Like collecting has just changed a lot, and that's not to say like you have to go do this or only collect 1950s top sets because those are the last sets you can chase these days. But I was thinking about that the other day watching somebody open like Flawless Football, right? I'm like, is there even a set? Like, are there actually like numbered cards in that set? I own 0 Flawless. It's just way out of my league.
There
right?
are.
Like, is it numbered? Like, I have no idea, but it's just like, who collects a set of like Flawless cards? I mean, you can't do it, right? So like, there's just, but Flawless is one of the most gorgeous, like amazing sets. Like, by the way, like shout out to people breaking cards, and I mean this like very earnestly. I don't mean to be like a smart ass here, but like you were saying before, it's very hard. Like I can't go buy a box of NBA Prism, but like people are chipping in and like fractional sharing those boxes and breaking it, and like that is a huge place to learn. Watching breakers and being in the chat rooms and asking questions. I mean, to all hours of the night, there's great breakers out there. I'd love to shout out a ton right now, like Mikey B. Just shout out to Mikey B Cards because he's the man, and he's battling cancer right now. So positive vibes out to Mikey B. And like there's great breakers. Blaz. I mean, and we could just go on and on. Layton's is on all the time, right? And there's what I've seen there is like there's hundreds of people watching Layton's every night right now. And it's just been this like climbing thing. So people talking about like the hobby falling and the sky is falling. Like,
well, I've said this, Jason. I don't know if you've heard me. Breakers have saved the hobby. There was a point wax was sort of plateauing, and breaking really came along and saved the hobby. I mean, I don't know if they'll ever admit it. I think they will, but Topps, Panini, Upper Deck, they're selling. They're nothing that don't sell out now. I mean, from non-sports to items that used to collect dust now sell out the first day, and breaking's a big part of that. And even me, I've even when I used to open more wax back a few years back, I would watch breaks, like you said. I would watch breaks to determine how these products are running. Do I want to open a box of this? I know what the box costs. Let me watch a couple box be open and then say, hey, is this really worth that $400 to buy a box on my own? And breaking's given everyone an opportunity to get in at a lesser price and have the opportunity to hit something crazy. We've seen people hit a $100,000 Zion with a $120 buy-in. I mean, you can't do that in the stock market, or very few and far between. And so, you can also lose too, but that's
maybe.
But don't get me going there. But I know we're not. you can lose too. I understand that, but sports cards are sort of a form of gambling. I know people don't like that all the time, but it is. And obviously you want to do, you don't want to spend more than you can afford. You don't want to not pay your mortgage because you bought a box of Flawless, like we were just talking about. You got to do the right thing and pay your bills first. But with that discretionary income, you can get into a Flawless break, and instead of paying $4,000 for your own box, you can pay $100 for a spot and possibly hit something that you might have hit that was real good in that $4,000, but it only cost you $100. And so breaking. We're seeing that's the thing we're seeing right now in hobby, which is everything is swelling up. We're seeing new grading companies, new breakers joining the foray, fractional share companies are coming out now. There's more of those too, and so the hobby's kind of exploding. And I always get asked like, what's going to happen? Like, I don't know, man. I can only speculate. At some point, there's the old saying like stuff can't always go up into the right forever, and so I think we talked about, we're seeing a little bit of a lull now on certain aspects of the hobby, and I think that's going to probably continue and maybe hit other parts, and everything Montgomery Club release has been pretty much a big hit. That might slow down. We might see just stuff sort of go for. It's funny. I thought the Trevor Lawrence X set from Topps was going to be that product. I almost didn't buy it.
Right.
I said this on my show a couple. I almost didn't buy it. I'm like, this is finally the one that might not. You might just break even, or you might even lose. And I had it in my cart, the 5 boxes you're allowed to buy, and I'm looking at it. I'm like, what do I want to do here? It's $400 right now. I'm looking at, and I'm like, I said to myself, worst case, wait, little voice in your head that we all have. I'm like, John, worst case scenario, you sell it at what it costs. You break even, and it is what it is. You learn that way, or even a little bit of a loss, right? And so I bought them, and right now they're going for $170 a piece on the secondary market. And so that 5 boxes is if you do the math, about $850, and I paid $400. So even on products that make like sort of you're leery of, they're double the amount. And so do I think that will last forever? No. But like if you ask me when does it stop, I can't give you a date or time or month or year, even a year. But I think we'll see. And I don't want to make it politics, but I think what we're going to see in real world with discretionary income and stimulus is not occurring anymore. I think that we don't really think about it on those terms, but I think those are going to have a direct effect on the hobby. I think they had a direct effect on part of the hobby boom, not 100%, but a definite impact and a good percentage wise. So I think when it goes the other way, economy wise, we're seeing gas prices rise right now, and so I think we're going to see what happens in real life. Not that cards aren't real life; cards are real life. But what we see happen in real life outside of the card market is going
the macro economy.
Is going to affect that, because it affects discretionary income. And so, I'm a politician.
You were talking about some of the retail stuff too, and like that we were talking resellers, but like I want to like put it in the context of like a lemonade stand, and even recession times. Right now, we have like a lot of unemployed people, and you were talking earlier about like younger people getting in. So like think of like college age kids, right? Like when I came out of college, this is like 2004, 2005, like I was making $11 an hour as a microbiologist, a degreed microbiologist. Like people don't come out of college and just magically get jobs right now. And so what's happening is those kids, they're kids to me now. I shouldn't say it like that. Those guys, those gals, whoever's out there, but like those folks that right now that are 18 to 24, like they're entrepreneurial. They're going out there, they're grabbing boxes. And like you just said, like, even if they break even on it, they're still in the game. And if they can hit something that goes, maybe they hit a Prism box that day, right? They spent an hour at Target, they hit a Prism box. Now they're going $20 to $100 or maybe even more. Like that's a lot of money to kids that age. And what that enables, that's a lemonade stand money, right? That's selling that they're pouring drinks for cars driving by at the end of the block. And people need to view it more in those terms of like, that's going to enable the economy to continue to grow right now, because those kids maybe they don't have jobs. I know people with electrical engineering degrees are fighting to find jobs because they're just not out there. And it's like, all right, so we need to take a different perspective on things and encourage that again too. So $20 can become 100. That's huge to people. The dollar boxes at card shows, we were talking before, like I give my son 20, he's 6 years old. So I don't care what he spends on, I give him $20. And I'm very, very fortunate that I'm able to do that. I encourage anybody out there, like, do that with your kids, do that with other kids too. And like, $5 here and there, they might find something in a dollar box that they can go sell and like take to another dealer's table. That's what I loved doing when I was a kid. My dad gave me $20. I'd run around, I'd find a dollar card that I could go to another place and sell for $5. And I'd get my $5 and I'd work my way up at these shows, and then I'd buy a box of cards and lose my shirt. So,
it all comes.
What goes around comes around.
Yeah,
but
and
you're in the game, and that's what matters most.
Yeah, and like I said, there's so many combinations of ways to be active in this hobby. If one doesn't work for you, there's an alternative, and it's a good way sort of to end on a high note. Is enjoy the hobby, any way you choose. If one path is blocked, take reroute and pivot to another direction, and whenever I see someone say, I'm getting out this, I think they were sort of leaning that way anyway. And because to me, there's so many different things you can do. Maybe just it was time, for that person to get out. But
take a 20-year buying break.
Yeah. Hey, I did one for 3 or 4 years, right on the Mike Trout rookie year. Yeah. So, and you did it, Pujols and the Chiros. So, Brady too. Actually, Brady's the big one there. But it is what it is, and like my shirt says right here. But it's fun too. We gotta have fun doing this, and there's just so many ways to do that. And I know you do that. I try, and I think most people are, and it's fun. Who knows what's next, right? That's like you said, the beauty of the hobby is that what's around the corner. Yeah,
novelty, fun, learning. I mean, those are all the things that just like soothe my brain. So I just grateful to be back in the hobby after all these years. We're grateful to be meeting folks and connecting with you on Twitter and the podcast networks out there right now. I mean, there's so many. Sports Card Nation's amazing. I mean, I just turn those things on, and it's like, I was a huge Joe Rogan listener and like love that stuff, but like your show and others like those, that feels like that 3 to 4 hour time slot that Rogan was filling up before. And once you moved over to Spotify, it's like now it's just sports card stuff all day long. So, I mean, those things, you guys are so invaluable, and just thank you for.
Yeah, you're in this space too. You're in this space too. There's no pension plan. There's no tenure. I'm no better, than anyone else. I appreciate the kind words. Don't get me wrong, but we all have a part to play. You're doing the show, and I'm doing the show, and we can be on each other's shows as we have been, and have fun with even content creation. It's funny. I think like if I wasn't doing a show, I think that keeps me even more active in the hobby, just because I have to learn this stuff and have to know. It's kind of like part of the training. Like it's like training at work. You're enrolled, and here's your date, and you better log on and do it. So that's and it's fun too. I don't want to make it sound like I always say it's a labor of love, and I love it, and you keep doing what you're doing. Speaking of that, Jason, thanks for coming on. Some great insight, and again, it don't matter how long your hobby. We all, like I just said, we all have a role to play. We're all big, small pieces in a big hobby. And so, where can people find what you're doing? Follow you on social media. Give out all that good stuff so people can track you down.
I'm at the card table. That's _card_table on Twitter. That's my main haunts. I mean, I got an Instagram and stuff like that, but I don't pay as much attention there. So check me out on Twitter. I love just questions and answers. I do some like YouTube live streaming, some Twitch streaming as well. That all kind of started off as a way to like keep my dad informed of like me going through our old card collection. But I don't have to keep him informed so much anymore. So it's just kind of become its own thing. And what I plan to do in the future, I guess, like the card table kind of becomes its own ordeal here soon. So we're going through the card collection, we're grading, we're honestly, I want to try to take some of the profits from our old card collection and one, put my kids through college, but two, I've dreamt of starting my own business and found myself out of a job recently. And so it's just, I'm going all in with that. So like leveraging and building something and creating a business with our card collection. And I want to try to like, I'm not like the best content creator and like video logging it all, but check me out at the card table over on YouTube. I'll be explaining my journey of starting a business, and cards are going to be paying for like half that thing up front. So like, it's going to be a ton of fun. The returns are coming back from all the grading companies here soon. I can't wait to share some of the story with the world because cards are going to be a big part of this new business coming up too. It's a little hint at it. It's the joining of two worlds, like craft beer and sports cards, right? Can't complain there. So that's coming up. That's what the card table is going to be, I guess, creating in the future and trying to show that, you know, to the world and bringing a different twist to like the card store / like pop-up flea market thing going on, because I got a little extra space in the site that I'm working on. So I look forward to it and sharing just the learning and joy of the sports cards, y'all. Look out for people in the community. Mental Health Awareness Week right now. So just say something, talk to somebody. I'm here for anybody, anytime. And we all should be there for each other. So I just much respect to everybody in the hobby community, and grateful to be part of it, and look forward to the future and what come on next in the hobby, man. It's so exciting right now. It's just, it's a great time to be here and a great time to be alive. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Jason. Great message too, man. You know, you never know what someone's going through, and what you say, even the smallest of things can, you know, that small pebble can make a big ripple, and both ways. It can have a negative effect, and we need to keep that in mind too. And so it's a great positive note. And craft beer and cards, that's right up my alley. So I like it. Thanks, Jason.
Cheers.